And well, Victoria's hotel quarantine debacle. I tell you, it's fast making Ruby Princess look like it was a well-run operation. Given what we're finding out day by day about the chaos of this operation, you've got to wonder, why on earth did Premier Daniel Andrews knock back the support of the Australian Army as he did last week? Well, today it all got a lot worse. A security guard in one of the hotels responsible for quarantine work blew the whistle on the very poor protocols that he operated under and the sense of crisis that permeated the whole of this frontline COVID operation. It was clearly a manifest failure of state government. The security guard said he was given just 5 minutes of training before being put on the job. Grant McArthur is the Herald Sun's health editor. He's been following this issue very closely. He joins me now from Melbourne. Grant, thank you very much for your time. I tell you what, I can't believe it is as chaotic as we're told day by day. No tender process, claims of guests moving around the hotels, going home, guards in and out, going to KFC, claims of guards having sex with quarantined travellers. What do we know?
We know everything. I mean, whoever you speak to in this, you just seem to turn over more. You're right. You hear of things in the hotels themselves, anything from guards propositioning guests to guards actually sleeping with guests. That's now being probed, so to speak, I guess. Not a good move when you consider these people are in hotels because they've potentially, or in the case of one hotel, if you're in there, it means you actually have a confirmed case of coronavirus. So any contact there is going to be bad, but then you hear of guests being allowed to change rooms to go and play cards with friends. On an even more sinister note, though, we're now finding out, and we've reported this morning, that some of these guards may not have even worked. They may not even exist. There's this rort called ghosting where you may have, say, 20 guards rostered on. Only 15 will show up. The other 5 might be fake names. They might be people who have no intention of going there, but their wages are paid. On one level, it's a rort to taxpayers where they're extorting wages. On a much more sinister level, though, that means the health authorities who are supposed to be overseeing this think there are more guards than what there is, which means that, one, there's not as much security over these guests, but 2, it means the guards who are there have to interact and have contacts with many more guests, which just multiplies the chances of anything being passed from one to another.
So just a few questions that this all prompts. You know, why did they go down the path of having outsourced private security, unlike other states? Why was there no tender? Is there any undeclared relationship between any of these companies and the Labor Party or Labor members of Parliament, or you know, it all seems a bit unorthodox to me. And the point you make about the ghosting, weren't there any audits or spot checks from people inside the government in the health bureaucracy, let's say, turning up and saying at any given time, let's say there had to be 15 guards on a floor of a hotel? Did they ever turn up to see that there were 15 guards, that check the paperwork was appropriately done and all the protocols were being followed? Because it appears to me it was sort of a set and forget. But this is the front line. This is the most important sort of protocol of all we had once we got the borders shut and the numbers internally under some sort of control. I'm very surprised.
We're all surprised. I think those people whose suburbs are locked down are probably the most surprised and angry, but we simply don't know the answers to a lot of that. Clearly, it seems something happened a couple of weeks ago where there must have been enough alarm bells ringing, where there were some changes, and it seems there has been more oversight since then. In the early days of this, it looks like it was absolute chaos, though. You're right, there was no tender process, as it were, the normal processes where contracts of this extent have got proper scrutiny and are analysed. This was done in 24 hours.
Let me just jump in there. Do you have any sense of how much these contracts are worth? Is there a statewide figure or anything you can tell us?
We don't know yet, no. I know, for instance, with each guest, we've had 20,000 guests come through Victoria's quarantine hotel system thus far. The average is actually only about $2,000 to $3,000 per guest for their stay, and that includes the security component of it. So the numbers there may not be super huge, but I mean, the real cost to taxpayers here is the fact that we have great swathes of Melbourne now, which are essentially shut down. There's businesses that are closing. The actual cost of the debacle will be in the billions, but by the time you add in all the flow-on effects to taxpayers, for something which probably would have not have been a very big outlay that they've avoided, whether you're paying ADF staff, health bureaucrats, doctors, or private security companies, the actual outlay at the start isn't that much. And that's going to have to be a huge component of the judicial inquiry, because why were the contracts awarded that way? I mean, there's talk now that other states, very much took this on as a public health issue, whereas Victoria, did they have an each-way bed? Was it part stimulus package for hotels? Was it purely a health, a public health situation? And if so, why would you have private security guards there?
Well, this is exactly
may have
right.
had minutes training in protective, equipment.
Well, this guy said today he had 5 minutes training. This I find fascinating because the two big entry points into our country when the borders were shut for returning Australians, all permanent residents, was Melbourne and Sydney. Now, I stayed in a hotel in Sydney, a hotel in the middle of town. It's a five-star hotel. It's a nice hotel. Paid for it myself. But when I turned up, police cars out the front, uniforms, screens, masks. I thought, gee, they're being pretty cautious. And it was only when I came down from my room the next day, and there's obviously police everywhere downstairs, again, I asked someone and they said, we've got COVID returnees or potentially COVID returnees in this hotel. And now I then found out, I wouldn't have stayed there if I'd known, my floor on the 19th floor was people like me, Australians staying there, but the rest of the place was full of travellers. Now, it was like Fort Knox, absolutely like Fort Knox. And I just don't understand why Victoria was different.
No, we're all waiting to find that out, and I suppose that will be certainly the major part of the judicial inquiry will be that. It was interesting today, Victoria's Chief Health Officer, Brett Sutton, was asked about whether he'd recommended this type of program, and he was quite quick to distance himself and say, no, it wasn't me who recommended this. He did.
Yeah,
he stopped there, yeah. But clearly people, want to be distanced from this. No one is putting their hand up and explaining that this is why it was organised this way, and certainly taking responsibility. So we're going to need this inquiry to get to the bottom of it. I'm not sure that we have a great direction on what the terms of reference are. That will evolve. But in terms of talking about your own experience and how it was locked down, it certainly looks from the outside that these hotels are locked down. There are security down the bottom. If you walk up to a hotel, you're in no doubt at who's inside. Part of the danger here is that those same security guards may have worked a shift at one hotel, then gone to the next, and then gone to another one. We know guards who have worked across 2 and 3 hotels. We also hear of guards that may have done shifts with quarantine guests, then moved on and guarded a supermarket or moved on to another job. Some of them are saying that they've been Uber drivers in their spare time. So
God help us.
Yeah.
Grant, this is going to go on and on and on, and I think there's a lot of government ministers tonight hiding behind that inquiry. There should be responses to the questions now, and the inquiry's purpose is to find out what, in terms of systemic failures there were and how they avoid this sort of thing again. But I don't like the idea of ministers failing to answer question after question in press conferences, as I saw today.